Good morning, my name's Amanda Bate and I'm a homeopath practicing in Abbots Langley, Hertfordshire. This is the second video all about At Home with Homeopathy, which is an online resource to help you learn more about homeopathy and how to use it. I'm going to talk about two things today. The cornerstone principle of homeopathy, which is like cures like, and then I'm going to talk about the remedy Arnica. Samuel Hahnemann is credited as being the founder of homeopathy. And when he was a doctor, he found that his methods were pretty barbaric. This is about 300 years ago. So he decided instead to make a living by translating medical textbooks. And one day he was translating a medical textbook by the Scottish doctor called Cullen. And his translation was all about how cinchona could cure malaria because it tasted bitter. And Samuel Hahnemann thought, well, lots of things taste bitter, so it can't be because of that. And so what he did, it was he got some of this plant and he took it himself until he poisoned himself. And he found that the poisoning symptoms were very, very similar to those of malaria, and he concluded that Peruvian bark, cinchona, would cure malaria because it could cause similar symptoms. And he put his theory to the test with many substances and found each time it to be true. He then went on to really dilute and succuss the substances he was working with, which made them very safe to use. And that principle is still used today in homeopathy. So homeopathy is all about like cures like. The remedy only becomes homeopathic if you've given it because of the principle like cures like. So here's an example of homeopathy without using a remedy. If you've been playing in the snow and your hands are really, really cold, they will warm up much quicker if you put them into cold water than if you put them into warm water. Try it and see. It's the same principle as when your windscreen is frozen. You don't put hot water on it, you put cold water on it, and the cold water melts the ice. So it raises the temperature, doesn't it? So homeopathy is all about finding something that is like whatever the person is going through. You might have a friend who's feeling very miserable and they talk to you about what's going on, and then you might tell a similar but more miserable story and it sort of lifts them, and that is homeopathy. So we just, for convenience, call the diluted remedies that we use homeopathic remedies. But always remember, you're looking for the like. Like cures like. So now let's talk about Arnica. Arnica is often the first remedy that brings people to homeopathy. And people use Arnica, even if they're not really into homeopathy. I've often heard midwives and doctors suggest Arnica, even though we're told that on the whole the medical profession is not pro-homeopathy. But let's talk about Arnica. I think it's a remedy we should be born holding as we come into this world, because it's great for shock, it's great for bruises, all physical injuries, sports injuries, going to the dentist, emotional shock like being made redundant. So look out for Arnica when you see bruises, cuts, sprains, strains, overexertion, aches and pains, such as doing the gardening or doing the decorating or spring cleaning, and at the end of the day you feel really achy and tired. Then take Arnica. It's fantastic for sports injuries. I used to play rugby and I used to be very involved as a volunteer in rugby, and it was fantastic for the aches and pains and bruises that the rugby players felt, whether they were children or adults. And when I played, I used to take Arnica before I had a match, and at half time, and I found that my aches and pains didn't affect me until afterwards. My energy stayed well up. It used to be, I don't know if it still is, that the French cycling team, Olympic cycling team, would take arnica frequently, and I've treated some boxers and they all know about arnica and use it. Arnica itself is made from a plant, a mountain daisy. It's part of the daisy family, and the early homeopaths observed that goats would go and eat some arnica plant if they'd taken a tumble down the hillside. And of course, in herbalism, arnica has been used for centuries. So what potencies do I recommend? If it's a small injury, like a child falling over, then you probably only need the sixth potency. But if you just want to buy one potency, then get the 30th. Let's think of some ideas, some examples that will help you understand arnica a bit better. If you've got children, you'll know that all children at some point walk into the corner of the door, don't they? Or they headbutt a radiator and they get a big egg appear. Well, arnica, if you give it straight away, you'll almost see the bump reduce in size. But not only that, it heals the shock, so that the terrible crying and fright that the child has had when they've fallen over or bashed their head, that goes too. So then they don't become cautious, thinking, well, I might hurt myself. Of course, they learn from it, but you don't want them held back by the fear. A few months ago, I was up in our high street in a shop, and my mother-in-law came in, and she had just taken a tumble in the high street and somebody else had helped her up. So I sat her down. She didn't want to drink water or anything, so I said, would you like some arnica? So she said, all right, dear. So I gave her some, and within a couple of minutes she suddenly looked up and said, do you know, I feel fine now, all the shakiness has gone. And up she got and went off and carried on doing her shopping. And that's quite something for a very elderly person. So think of arnica for shock, for tumbles, for injuries, anything where there's been something physical and something emotional, which is the shock. Fantastic after childbirth, as I said. You can give it during childbirth, because childbirth is so intensive. The mother often gets tired, so you give it and it sort of gives the muscles a new lease of life. It can be quite a shock for a baby being born, and while the mother is breastfeeding, if you give the mother some more arnica, the baby gets arnica as well. How often do you give it? The more severe the injury or the shock, the more often. So if somebody, if somebody was in a car accident, you might want to give it every half hour. If you've had a sports injury, you might want to take it after the sports injury, again at night and the next day. So you play homeopathy by ear, you take it as it's needed. I'm going to write a blog post later today, probably this evening, with a bit more information about arnica, and I'll be including in that blog post more of the emotional, mental symptoms that help you to see that arnica is needed, and I will differentiate it with another remedy, because homeopathy is about the individual and not everyone needs arnica after a shock or an injury. So I hope you'll read the blog post as well. Thank you very much for listening. Do like this post or share it or add a comment for me or ask a question, and I hope you will visit my website to refresh your memory about what we've covered so far if you need to. My website is www.amandabatehomeopath.co.uk. I hope to see you again soon. Thank you once again. Bye.